Marisha here, and recently my friend tagged me on an internet forum because a woman who is a teacher in the US had asked about moving to the UK to be a teacher, along with her husband, who is also a teacher. And my friend just tagged me because she knew obviously I was a teacher in the States and now I'm a teacher over here and thought I could give some advice on that. And I thought to myself, um, this is probably not the only person in America who is thinking about moving abroad right now. And so I thought I would make a quick video. Well, I hope it'll be a quick video, giving my advice or just some heads up to American teachers who might be thinking they want to move to the UK to teach. And I was originally going to make this video about moving to the UK in general, and it just got away from me. There was way too much that I was talking about. So I'm going to try to keep this a little bit shorter and focus just on the teaching. But the first thing that I will say is that if this is a decision that you're considering because it's kind of a whim or because you feel under a lot of like pressure because of the current climate in the US and you're feeling panicky, like, oh, I need to get out now because things are really bad. Take don't do it. Take the time to let your emotions kind of subside and really think about what it entails to move abroad and recognize that you're not going to be able to do it immediately anyway. So, the first thing that I noticed when this woman was posting, and I've noticed this before with some other people who had posted questions about working in the UK, is there's this misconception that you can just hop on a plane and go to another country and look for work and find your job and then like find a house and just start living there. And that is not the case at all. That is not legal. I think there are a lot of people who think like, oh, I'll just go over there and I'll look for work. No, 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 no. You cannot do that. When you come to another country on your American passport and you don't have a visa, right? You're just coming because you have the power of an American passport and people let you in without a visa. They're letting you in as a tourist. And in the UK, I think you have up to 3 months where you can be here as a tourist. But during that time, if you try to look for work and you get caught, right, you're going to get kicked out of the country and you probably will get put on a list of not being able to be allowed in again. And even if you did find work, the employer who is willing to hire you under those circumstances is breaking the law. So like do not do anything that is going to jeopardize, right, your life in terms of like getting into legal trouble. So you'll need to get a work visa before you come over, and that's going to make it tricky. I admit that. Like, I didn't have to do that because I was already in the country as a student, and so I was allowed to look for work under the current visas that I had. But if you're in the US, that means your job search is obviously all online because all job searches are now at this point. No one's answering ads in the newspaper, but it means that your interviews are going to be online. It is going to be a little bit trickier, and you may have to work with an agency that specializes in hiring foreigners. And I do believe there is a teaching agency that does that. I cannot attest to whether they're any good or not. I can attest to the fact that the agencies that I used over here were useless, and I ended up getting my job on my own. Um, so, but I don't know what that agency is like in terms of dealing with people who are in the US. So, if you're able to secure a job that way, um, and keep in mind that it might depend on what you teach because it has to be a shortage subject. It has to be a subject where there's a shortage of teachers in that subject. Now, the good news is, and it's sort of good news, sort of bad news. The good news is that there is a teacher shortage in the UK, such that as an English teacher, that is a shortage subject, which I think is hilarious that they can't find native English people to teach English that I was able to do it as an American. The bad news is there's a teacher shortage for a reason, and it's the same reasons why there's a teacher shortage in the US. So while you may be escaping kind of the current political climate in the US and the book banning and school shootings, and I'm not going to pretend that's not important because that was one of the major drivers of me ending up over here. Um, you're not going to escape the fact that teaching is a as a profession over here is not highly respected. It's not well paid. It's still a lot of work. And yeah, so all of the complaints that you would have in the States as a teacher, you're going to have over here. So just be aware of that. But let's say that yes, you teach a shortage subject and you're able to get your work visa. Um, keep in mind that that process can take a long time. It can take a long time to find work. You know that it's not any different over here than in the States, and it's going to be even worse because you have that extra hurdle of being a foreigner, and that limits the jobs that you're able to realistically apply to. And then you have the process of filling out all your visa paperwork, making your appointment to go get your biometrics taken. And depending on where you live, it might take a while for an appointment time to open up. Um, then you'll have to pay your visa fee as well as your NHS fees up front. So let's say you get a visa for 3 years. You have to pay 3 years worth of NHS fees. Um, so you need to have that money up front. You'll need to have a lot of money in savings to do this because it's not just your visa, it's not just your NHS fees, but then obviously also flying to England, taking all of your stuff, right? Are you putting it in storage? What are you going to ship over? I don't know, it's up to you. Um, finding housing and maybe having, a security deposit as well to pay up front, etc. There's a lot of all the expenses that come with moving, but even more so because it's international. Um, so you've got your visa paperwork filled out, and then you have to wait on that. The other thing as a teacher that you need to consider is that you'll want to apply for qualified teacher status in the UK, or QTS. And it should be relatively easy as an American with a teaching degree because it's an um, equivalent certification, your teacher certification. But it's a really long process. For me, I applied in August and I didn't get mine until March, right? And I didn't have the same hurdles as people from other countries that are not native speakers and have to prove that they're native speakers. So while it will be a little bit easier for you as an American because you don't have to worry about the English proficiency restrictions or requirements for both your visa and qualified teacher status, um, it still does take a long time. I don't know what's going on in the QTS office because that was just a ridiculous amount of time to wait for my stuff to get processed. And I've seen on internet forums other people, it's taken more than a year for them to get their QTS approved. And they're Americans, right? So with teaching degrees and certifications. So there's just like the bureaucratic red tape and like the slog, the time slog is something to consider. Now, you'll you may be able to find a job without QTS. Um, because some employers will realize like, oh, obviously if you have teaching certification in the States, that's the equivalent. And especially if you've been teaching for however many years and you have good references, some schools are smart enough to look at that and say like, yes, obviously we're going to take this person, they know what they're doing. But just be aware that there are a lot of schools where the application process is all electronic and it's not, here's my CV or resume. You have to type everything in. And if what you have doesn't fit with their drop down menu, then you're kind of screwed. You don't have any way of doing it. And so some schools will have a system set up where Clearly, they just want something that they can feed to AI, and then AI is searching for QTS. And so if it's not there, you're not even going to be considered. So just be aware of that reality. The reason that you want QTS, besides it making you more employable in those circumstances, is that it affects your pay as well. So until you get that, um, you can technically be paid less. Now, I don't know what other schools are like. My school, like, knew that I had the equivalency, so they just paid me the equivalent of, and they knew that I had applied for QTS and that it was forthcoming. It was just a matter of time. Like, there's no reason it wouldn't get approved. So they went ahead and they put me on a contract at QTS salary level, but who knows what each individual school will do in your case. So just get an application for that as soon as you can, because it will take forever, and it's good to have it. The other thing that you want to keep in mind in regard to pay is you're probably going to take a pay cut. It's not great pay, but that will depend on where you were teaching in the States. But where I was teaching, in Northern Virginia, and this is a rough estimate because it's, comparing dollars to pounds, I'm probably getting paid about 20 grand less per year than I was in the States. And then the other thing to consider is that there's no extra pay for having an advanced degree like there is in the States. So it doesn't matter if you have a master's or a PhD, you're not getting any extra money. So if that's you, if you're someone who is kind of high up on the pay scale at your school because you have an advanced degree, or even just a bachelor's plus, like that's not a thing over here. You might want to look at what you could expect to get paid over here and compare it to what you're getting paid in the States. Look at cost of living, but also, take that into consideration. You also will not get paid for every single year of experience that you have. The pay scale in England only stops after like 6 years or something ridiculous. So like you're a teacher who's like been teaching for 20 years, like you're treated the same as a teacher who's been teaching 6 years in terms of pay. So yeah, pay scale, you're gonna be really surprised by that. I know I was. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that they didn't like recognize advanced degrees, but whatever. Um, the other thing that is interesting is you don't have to have a degree in the like subject that you teach over here. Like there's no rules about that. I think that most schools still are looking for candidates who have a degree in that subject, but like technically if I wanted, I could apply for like science teaching jobs even though I've never taught science and I don't have a degree in it. Um because I don't know if that's because of the teacher shortage and they just want to make it easier for people to become teachers or what, but it's not actually a rule. Um, Again, though, I think most schools probably still try to get people who are subject area specialists, but it is strange that that's like, there's no praxis, right? There's no like subject area test that you have to pass. Um, so those are things to consider. Um, The other thing is just that teaching is very different over here. Like very, very different. And I won't go into all of that because I'm probably going to make a series of videos talking about the differences between US and UK. But I just wanted to make this initial one of what would it take to actually even just get over here as a teacher if you're considering it. It's maybe a little bit trickier, a little bit more expensive, a little bit more time consuming than you might have initially thought. And so it's important to keep all of those things in mind. Think about, where in England you might want to live and what's that going to look like. Look up what life is like. Consider that culture shock is an actual thing that you will go through. I think a lot of people make the mistake of, oh, it's England. There are cousins across the pond, and English is the official language, and so there won't be a language barrier and whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's not like, moving to China or Japan or something. And while yeah, it's true, right? You don't have the language barrier the same way, but you will discover that the adage, two countries separated by the same language, is true. And you will discover other instances of culture shock. And don't 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 minimize it. Don't underestimate that just because it's England and not, some far-flung country that you've barely ever heard of before. Um, so yeah, consider the cost, consider the time, consider the culture shock, consider that it's not it's not Scandinavia. I know that there are a lot of memes that people like to share in teacher forums online, about like Finnish schools and teachers, and how teachers are treated in those places, and what school is like there. That's not the UK. The UK is a completely different beast, and there's a reason that there's a teacher shortage here. I'm not saying this to try to scare you off from doing it. Obviously, I'm happy that I'm here. I'm happy that I got my visa approved, and I'm going to be here for another 3 years, and all of that. But it's not for everybody. I just want you to have a realistic idea of, what you would be getting yourself into. And also, I already had, 3 years, or well, 2.25, 2.5 years living here as like a student and getting used to the culture and things like that before I started my job. And entering into my job was like a new phase of culture shock because it is very, very different. So, if you're a teacher, you're thinking of coming on over here and you still think like, no, but I really do want to do this, right? These are the main things that you need to consider before you even get here. And then I think I will probably end up making some more videos talking about the differences between US and UK schools, because like I said, it was a whole new wave of culture shock for me, and I'm actually still going through it. Um, so that might be useful for people who are considering coming over here to hear. And it might be entertaining for everyone else to hear, just to hear kind of what the differences are between the two school systems. Like, subscribe, tell your friends how gnarly this channel is, and I'll see you next time.